Welcome to Protecting Your Assets, the show about protecting people, property, and most importantly, protecting your ass. I'm your host, Lucky Luciano, and I'd like you to join me for a fast-paced and often fiery discussion about security issues with my co-host, Brian the Angry Man Claman. Whether we're piercing the veil of security, talking your duty of care, or raving about the latest technology, we'll share our thoughts on the issues, the trends that are impacting security today and into the future. And now let's talk about protecting your assets. Hello, folks, and welcome to Protecting Your Assets. I'm Lucky Luciano Cedrone. With me, Brian the Angry Man Claman, as always. We're going to be talking public safety, something that should be a concern to everybody out there, and that we are all in it together. It only works well when everyone's at the table contributing, and we're going to talk about that with our special guest this week, Wendy Drummond. If you don't know her, you've probably seen her on TV, being interviewed in a number of critical incidents in the downtown community. But Wendy is currently with the Crime Prevention Auxiliary Program Coordinator. She is the Crime Prevention Auxiliary Program Coordinator with the Community Partnerships and Engagement Unit with the Toronto Police Service. She began her over 28-year career as actually a 911 call taker before becoming a police officer in the 14 and 32 Division, before moving on to 13 Division as a newly promoted road sergeant. She's worked in strategy management, social media, alarm coordinating, talent acquisition and recruiting, and she's done 10 years at the corporate communications level, where she's been involved with significant events, including the Sunrise Explosion. We all remember that one. G8G20, Brian and I certainly remember that one. The Danzig shooting and the Young Street building collapse. So welcome, Wendy. We're so happy to have you on the show. It's good to have someone else to talk to besides Brian, because he does get a little boring sometimes. Brian?
I hear you there. Very much for inviting me on your show.
We're going to get right into it. We're keeping these podcasts tight and on the agenda. So let's get into this whole discussion on public safety, Wendy. Really start off, I would like to start off with an idea as to what you, certainly in the policing service, consider the public space. Like when we talk about public safety, what are you really talking about?
Well, it's very simple. Public is everybody in that space, and safety is keeping them safe from harm. And in order to do that, there's a number of things that have to come into play. And I think you had mentioned it. It is everybody's responsibility. Police are there as an oversight, as a organization that has skills and the tools and the authority to enact when somebody's safety or a community's safety is at risk. But it's everybody's responsibility. And this year's Crime Prevention Week theme, Safer, Stronger Together, strengthens and emphasizes the importance of everybody having a public safety.
So when you refer to public safety, and obviously we agree that everyone has a role in that, but I'm curious, do you break down what you consider public safety into certain groups? Like, is there public in terms of like, are we talking businesses versus the average citizen, schools? Like, is it broken up into those types of segments, or you just consider everyone part of the public realm?
Well, yeah, no, everybody is part of the public realm when it comes to public safety. I think perhaps when you think of crime and safety in terms of crime prevention, then we start to really branch off and find some specialties, areas of concern, areas of issue, things that are going to be relevant to one segment of the population as opposed to the other, being commercial, business, residential, social issues. So there's a whole bunch of things that come into play when you're talking about public safety, and crime prevention being a major one.
Wendy, when talking about participation, engagement with the community, over the 300 years that you've been in policing, 28 years, I didn't realize it was that long. Have you seen a difference? Do you find that the community and the public are more engaged today or less? Because if you just look at what's on TV, it almost seems like there's this great divide between us and them, if you will. What are your thoughts? What have you seen?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think what the public sees is what is portrayed in the media. Working here at Community Partnerships, some of the different units that we have here are the liaison officers. We've got our neighborhood officer program, the youth initiative, our auxiliary program. And all of these programs work on a daily basis with organizations within the community, non-for-profit agencies. The amount of work that goes on and the good things that go on to help, people, whether it be in crime prevention or just, in general, it's not seen. So in my role and my ability to be exposed to both sides, I think things have gotten better. I think that the relationship that the police have with the community has strengthened. I think that the police services, not only Toronto, but all, have really listened to the public and are continuing to outreach, town hall meetings, the CPLC. So, community members joining and being part of the Toronto Police Service and being a voice for their community, for them telling us what's happening in their communities, what's a concern to them, things that might not be a major crime indicator happening in their community, but it's a nuisance to them and it bothered the people that live there. So that's crime prevention, the perception of crime, conception and perception of how safe they feel in their community. I mean, but those people that live there, it's an issue. So, being able to have that communication with us, and then us being the police, able to hand in hand with the community, the businesses, the organizations, to fix or resolve or find solution, has increased dramatically that I've seen in my 28 years.
It's interesting you sort of, I think, refer to perception. It may not be a major crime indicator, but it's important to whoever that partner is or that constituent is. And I just finished with a client, a government entity. And one of the things we explained to them is, although the data may not suggest a problem, the users of the facility they feel unsafe, and that perception is a reality. And it's nice to hear that the police are not just looking at the data, but you're sort of interacting with different community partners. Say, what do you think? And then you could see, is there an alignment with the data and the reality or the perception? And if not, I assume you just dig deeper. The other thing I just wanted to talk about, I want to echo something you said about the partnerships. In my last life, when I worked downtown, and Luke was there also, when we started that journey, probably about 20 years ago, there was not a lot of formal relationships with the police and the security community. But over time, we developed that. We developed some really good partnerships. And it was really meaningful both ways. It was really meaningful to us in the private sector to really have an understanding of what was happening around us and being able to influence the police in terms of what priorities they might want to consider. And conversely, our police partners would tell us that it was very meaningful to them because they got a lot of stuff and information that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And the lesson I learned, and I think Luke and I talked about this just last week on the last podcast, was that a lot of people just feel that, the police are over here. We really can't bother them. And, if we call them and say, let's work together, they're not going to talk with us. But I think you're living proof of that the police really want to work with members of the community in all sorts of non-traditional ways.
Absolutely. I mean, our common goal is public safety, safety and security. Without working together, we're duplicating jobs. And I think we've come to realize that we need to work smarter. We need to pool our resources. We need to share information. And we need to train people, whether education, if you consider that training, bringing them in and actually doing the training to make our partners, community partners, whether that be security, other, like working with the alarm companies. That was one of my other jobs as alarm coordinator, and working with organizations like CANASA and having that partnership, because clearly we can't be everywhere. So many other eyes and ears on the street. There's so many other partners that are, again, the same goal, protecting public property, personal safety. So why would we not work together? So those partnerships have definitely strengthened. I mean, it just goes to show. This morning I had a phone call, introductory phone call, and going to be doing some work together with Uber. So how many Uber drivers are out in the street? Potentially providing information about human trafficking, providing about carjacking, providing information about if they happen to come across an incident that's happening, right then and there. So that there's that partnership. Who would have ever thought that some people may not even see the connection, but there's tremendous opportunity there that we have to explore and that we are exploring. The people are the police, and the police are the people.
I heard that somewhere.
Heard it too.
I heard that somewhere. Go on, Luke. I'm sorry.
Otherwise, Brian will hog all the airtime. So I have a question. Going back to the initial comments you made on this, the police are, and the police have done a lot of work to try and build those relationships and overcome a lot of things that the media, quite frankly, was way offside in directing or saying. But I'm curious to see your perspective on the other side of that equation. Is the private sector changing? Do you see a positive movement on there? Like you've talked about Uber, great example, and there's other examples out there of great community partnerships where the private sector has stepped up. But I still think that they're often the exception rather than the rule. And certainly in my experience with most of the private sector, property managers and stakeholders that I've dealt with, there's still this misconception out there that, I'm just going to call 911 anyway when I need them and everything will be taken care of. Is that still largely out there? Is that still a problem that you're trying to overcome? Or has the private sector, in your view, in your experience, starting to realize that, hey, we got to take care of ourselves and we have to own some of that?
Yeah, I think it is a bit of both. I think it's a bit of both. We're definitely seeing a greater relationship, a greater outreach, greater partnership. Our Crime Prevention Week was held at Canadian Tire right in the community. And that was, in doing a launch for Crime Prevention Week, we think about who are we trying to reach? Who is affected? Private businesses are affected by crime just as much. So there's in-store theft, there's in-store robbery, just disorder. So for us, reaching out to a community partner, to a corporate business and saying, what do you think? Can we come? Would you open your doors? Let us into your store to, host this event. And we were, welcomed with open arms. And would do anything for us, anything that we wanted, clear the space. So those partnerships are happening. We see the importance of having those corporate partnerships and that support, because when things happen to them in their stores and we're coming in to investigate, it's a familiar face. It's a familiar neighborhood officer that continues to go by and visit and build those relationships. So, if there's an investigation on way, we have that partnership. We know who to call. So definitely seeing an increase. And it's the age of we need to do something. We need to take action. So a lot of corporations are looking and seeing what specifically they can do. If it's not even on the enforcement side, it's on the prevention side. And I mean, that's one of my key elements is in the crime prevention. And there's so many things that can be done.
Wendy, let me ask you a question about crime prevention, because I know as a consultant, when I deal with clients, often they want to understand the return on investment. For example, how do I know if I do this, that, or the other, it's having a meaningful effect? How do you guys in the service able to validate your crime prevention efforts? I mean, you're looking, I'm sure, at all sorts of data. You're looking at crime rates in neighborhoods, things of that nature. But is there anything special that you look at that maybe the private sector could look at to evaluate the effectiveness? Or is it just the level of engagement? I guess that'd be a good metric. More people are engaged in talking.
And that's a topic of our discussion quite often when we're looking at crime prevention and talking about things that we can implement. How are we going to measure it? What are our matrix? What are our analytics? Everything, a lot of things are driven based on data and our statistics that we're gathering. So clearly, is a decline in or a reduction in criminal, especially the major crime indicators, is that indicative of good crime prevention? Definitely, it's one of those things. But you, as we mentioned before, you can have crime go down in a neighborhood, the neighbors still not, and the people that live there, work there, still not feel safe. So some of the things that are working, the engagement, reporting actually may go up. If the relationship between the community and the police increases, there's going to be an increase in communication. Increase of communication means information sharing, could lead to an increase in actually reporting of crimes. So you may have an area where your reported crimes are on the increase. Does that mean it's had an increase in crime? It essentially means that engagement has increased, therefore the community feels safer in coming to us, reporting, and we're able to enact and put things in place. Things like returning to the playground in an area where crime was perhaps rampant, and the community feels safe and having their kids in the playground. Now we've got kids back in the playground. We've got flowers being planted. We've got an enhanced curb appeal happening, more people walking at all times of the hours. So there's quite a few things that can be looked at that would be a gauge of positive impact aside from a decline in crime rate.
Actually, you said something that got my attention. I suspect Luke's also, about the curb appeal and the parks and the plants and everything. And I think you're referring to CPTED. I'm a big proponent of CPTED, and I really think it does make a real meaningful difference in the short term and the long term. It makes people feel better, and if something looks nice, you take pride of ownership and all those good CPTED principles. In the city of Toronto, is CPTED owned by any particular entity? Is it the city that owns it? Is it planning that owns it? Is it police department that owns it? Who's the champion, if there is one?
Yeah, no, I mean, CPTED is a concept, and it's something that the Toronto Police advocate. We have our auxiliary members who are trained. CPTED
level one, or
enabled to go out there and conduct audits. Our neighborhood officers, our crime prevention officers, we go out to not just like homes, we go out to businesses, hospitals, religious facilities. We go out to a number of different locations, including residential homes, and providing that information, giving them things to think about. And it's definitely something that is an integral part of crime prevention. There's not one person that owns it, but it's a theory, it's a concept that is widely spread and accepted.
We just completed a big project of a residential portfolio, and some of the locations were sort of high crime locations, not just the neighborhood, but the properties themselves, and others were really, really nice. And a common theme that we saw that was so obvious: the ones that looked nice were nice. The ones that had nice gardens and didn't have debris and garbage around had low crime rates and had high perceptions of safety. And the ones that just looked in disrepair, almost without exception, had higher crime and disorder rates. And when you would query the tenants that lived there, they had fear factors, or perception of their safety was very, very poor, even more poor than the actual data of the crime and disorder occurring. So I really think it's a really important crime prevention tool. And the nice thing that I believe about CPTED is it's not really expensive. It's really just tweaking what's already out there.
And in giving crime prevention tips, it doesn't have to be expensive. A light bulb, having lighting, keeping the hedges trimmed, keeping lawn cut, picking up garbage, not leaving mail, on the doorstop. There's a lot of things that aren't or that don't come with a big price tag, that can have a huge impact.
Well, Luke the other day was telling me he was just complaining about the amount of crime that's occurring on his street. And I said, Luke, just, clean up the yard, cut the grass, paint the house. It looks like heck. So, really, Luke, I think today's episode really is going to help you personally in your own life and lower your insurance rates potentially.
Unfortunately, my city's been in the news for the wrong reasons a lot in the last few weeks. Carrying that CPTED idea and expanding it just a little, Wendy, when it comes to, Toronto's huge, as we all know. It's a massive city with all the issues that entails. What types of technologies are you looking at in public safety to help you sort of gather up that data and maybe leverage it to communicate out to your stakeholders, to the public? How is that changing? Because in the past, all you really had was the media, right? You'd do a press release and hope that everyone was watching the news at 6 o'clock. But today you've got a whole fleet or a suite of tools available to you. How's the Toronto Police Service leveraging that?
Yeah, we've definitely come far with our use of technology and our analytics and innovation. So if anybody has been on the Toronto Police website, there's a portal and lots of data in there. Talks about and doesn't talk about, but it allows us to be more transparent as well with things that are happening. And it also provides a better understanding for the community at large as to what's happening within their city. So there's definitely that knowledge is power. Social media is really transformed us when I was in communications. So we're talking 12, 13, 14 years ago, social media was just making an appearance. And myself and Scott Mills, Tim Burrows, there was quite a few of us down in corporate communications that branched out and started using it. And, in the early days, noticed how many people wanted that communication, wanted that information. As you know, it's grown. We do notifications in wanting to make people alert to what's happening for a couple of reasons. One, for their personal safety, but also two, again, the public is the eyes and ears out there. There are information. They provide us with what we need. So getting that out there is definitely has been a huge increase. It allows us to tell our story. It allows us to put out what we want, when we want, timely manner, timely, efficient, and we've definitely seen returns on that.
I must say that it is very impressive how you guys have leveraged social media. And I know, Wendy, you and talk about Scott and Tim Burrows and others were the pioneers. And I think the way you look at it, its use today versus its inception, I don't think anyone could have seen how important a tool it would become. But I do have a bone to pick with you in that you talked about the website and you have all your data up there in full disclosure. And that really irks me as a consultant, because before you did that, I could have charged a lot of money to a client to get them that crime data. And now my kids go hungry because I can no longer do that business because you do it better and quicker than I could have ever. So we're still friends, but I thought I'd say that.
I'd like to apologize, but you know what? The public needs us.
I thought we were friends, but the public comes first. I get it. Okay.
I got two more questions I want to touch on before moving on, and that I want to get in before the session. The next one is a little, and it's not meant to be exploratory in a negative way, but we've talked about the technology. We've talked about the complexity of the public sector and how that's changed and continues to change. And so I'm just curious, how is the police service trying to adapt for that policing model of tomorrow? Sure, you're going to say training and all that kind of stuff, but are there new areas that are emerging? Is really what I'm asking, that weren't in sort of your tool belt in the past. What comes to mind really off the top would be probably like drone technology. Is that something that's of interest? Do you have now drone pilots out there, or cybersecurity would be another one that wouldn't have been in the police service's mandate 10 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've touched on several of them. Technology, the advances have changed everything. Auto theft, with being remote, parts changed the way people steal cars. police. You're right, Bitcoin and currency. The Toronto, we had November, no, October, the fraud prevention, and one of the big things was Bitcoin fraud. Yeah, and the challenges that go along with that, and it's the challenges of being able to trace where that money is gone. But you have to keep up. You have to keep up. You have to look forward. And we are our cybercrime unit works with our fraud department. We are, without giving anything away, looking at technologies, and we are becoming and are leaders in getting that technology and software that is allowing us to, search deeper and darker into where this currency is and where it's going, who took it, all that kind of, for security.
I guess it's like you used to be in recruiting, so I guess it would be fair to say also that profile that you've been looking for is certainly changed. In the past, it would have been, perhaps someone who can take care of business on the street, for lack of a better word. And now you're really looking at people who understand, computers, who understand technology versus how to deal with people directly.
This thing is like no other. It really is. Under one umbrella, you have multiple layers of skills and abilities, and things that you may not even think of. So you're right. When we're looking at our recruiting and people that coming in, it's changed. That has changed as well. And we talk about modernized policing. They're coming now. Instead of coming out of high school or university, they're coming out of a couple of years within a field of expertise. We look at that, and it is definitely something. Lived experience, skills, and abilities are really what make the diverse hiring a benefit to the service.
Now, I have a lot of lived experience. Am I too old? Don't answer.
I think the tablet in stone went out a while ago.
Thank you. That's why I like listening to Wendy and not you.
Minimum age of 18. There is no ceiling.
Actually, just out of curiosity, what age would be the oldest person that you've seen go through or get hired in recent years?
So me personally, I've seen somebody in their 50s.
Wow.
So, I'm sure there's other ranges out there, but that would be for my personal experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I think forward-thinking organizations have gotten rid of that cap on the top, because you're right. Physical fitness, youth is an important part of policing, but also wisdom. And I think a lot of people don't realize it's not just muscles. There's a lot more to it than what you perceive or what you see on TV.
Absolutely. We aim to de-escalate, grow at that zero harm. That comes with somebody with experience. It comes with empathy. It comes with problem solving, and lived experience is what enables somebody to have those traits.
Yeah.
So that's a good opportunity to segue into my final point. And just a reminder that, even the career is changing, right? Like people get 2-3 careers now in a lifetime, and we're living older. So 50 ain't all that old anymore. Brian is old regardless, but the rest of us can still get a career at that age. That's one of the challenges to preparing for the world of tomorrow and what public safety means going forward. What are some of the other challenges that you see to success, Wendy, in terms of creating that public service model that we're striving for, that interconnectivity? We've talked about technology, we've talked about some of the recruiting, the changes of the type of people you're looking for to fill those gaps. What are some of the challenges that are out there that you see could affect the success of the program?
Technology definitely keeping up. So it's always that, having to be a step ahead. Financially, the budget is always something that plays a role in order to do the training, to do the research, to do the hiring. That's definitely out there. Some of the challenges that are happening with society, mental health is definitely a big one, and being able to work things out with our community partners and really, identifying what service is best needed for a particular incident or series of instances, look at and work with our, again, partners to work together to identify where our services are needed, what services are best delivered by whom, and ensuring that those services are available when they're needed.
Brian's paused again. It's amazing. Twice in one show.
You had warned me before we started that I have to keep it tight. So
I would only inject into those challenges because I appreciate the fact that you're speaking from the police side and all the sensitivities that have to be there. But I would definitely call out the private sector as well as a challenge. They need to understand that you guys can't do it alone, that they need to be involved. They can't just wait and expect you to show up on their doorstep when things go bad. And that means getting involved. I can't tell you the amount of times I get out to properties nowadays in my full-time job. I still interact a lot with property management. And the amount of times I ask them, well, are you dealing with the local police division? And their eyes glaze over like, what do you mean? We can do that? Absolutely. They've got liaison officers committed to this type of working relationship. They've got crew teams out there, core teams, whatever resources that are out there. And for some reason, a lot of the private sector still doesn't appreciate the fact that they're out there, that they're available. And it really is it undersells the value that Toronto Police is bringing to the city because they've gone through a lot of effort to put these resources out there. And people just aren't aware or aren't utilizing them as much. So I think that's one of the challenges we need to overcome is to get the messaging to the private sector more efficiently, more effectively. I don't know how that's going to happen, but it needs to happen so that you guys get the support that you need.
Right, it takes the right person as well. That information is out there. It takes a leader to step up and to make those calls and recognize that that they can be a part of the solution as well.
I think it's just easier to blame others than to take ownership, and as you say, when to be part of the solution. Too many people just don't take the time to understand and get engaged, and they just say, we'll call 911, or the police should have done better, or the police aren't trained. But I've got to give it to Canadian policing, and especially the Toronto Police, that you guys really are forward thinking, and the things that you're doing, that you offer the community, that didn't exist. Even 5 years ago and 10 years ago, certainly didn't exist when I started down this journey a million years ago. So kudos to the Toronto Police. And I just wish that more people would appreciate how fortunate we are in this country and in this city to have the type of police that we have.
I guess maybe because it's not in the media, it's not out in the forefront, but quite often, we'll be out and people will thank us. At the Crime Prevention Week, as I said, we're out in the community, out at Canadian Tire, right on their store floor. And if I could count how many times people came up to thank us for what we do, it's nice because we don't, hear it globally a lot. On a one-to-one, I think we're doing okay.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear that because I know it's a hard job, and I know that if it bleeds, it leads. So when people say thank you or say the police officer did a great job or helped me with this problem, that typically doesn't lead the news. It's all the times that things maybe don't work out the way we want them to work out or mistakes leads the news, and that sort of drives the narrative. So it's nice to know that silent majority maybe is not as silent as they used to be.
All right, so I think we're going to move on to closing comments, given our time. And, for me, I would say thank you, Wendy. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. I think you've been certainly forthright, honest, and great content in terms of understanding where the police service is going. I will echo Brian's comments that in my experience, okay, I'm a former police officer too, so I'm a little biased, but I would still say that every police service that I've had the pleasure of interacting with, not just Toronto, but I will speak about Peel, York, Durham, I haven't had too many interactions with, but certainly in Vancouver when I traveled a lot, Calgary. Toronto, the Canadian policing environment is not the American policing environment. And I think that's often overlooked, certainly by the press and the media who just focus on the American garbage that goes on to the south of us. But, you guys are doing a great job. I sincerely believe that you've been unfairly and seriously mistreated on some issues. But you've overcome that, and you've accepted faults, and you've gone to fix them with special units, special training, all these kinds of things. So you don't fear change, and I think that that's commendable. And you're on the forefront, to Brian's comments, at the forefront of where policing needs to go. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for being on the show, and turn it over to Brian, and then Wendy for his final thoughts.
Just want to say thanks, Wendy. You've been a great friend and a great collaborator over the years. You are a great ambassador to Toronto Police, and you really live the spirit of partnerships and engagement. I know that I met you again when I was downtown in the financial district, and the amount of sharing and openness and transparency was just such a breath of fresh air. And keep up the good work. You and your colleagues doing great stuff. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
All right, folks, that wraps it up. We will come to you live, well, not live, but edited, with episode 5 on January 1st. That'll be our New Year's edition, Brian. So I hope you're going to wear.
Wendy's our New Year's baby. Okay.
Better have your heels on, and we're good to go. So with that, thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget to like our podcast. We appreciate it. It helps us with our algorithm, as they like to say. And until next time, take care, stay safe.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
That concludes this podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and will join us in a couple of weeks for our latest episode. Please remember to like and follow us on our sponsor's webpage, brianclaman.com, where you can leave us your comments and suggest topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening, and don't forget to protect your assets.